Morning, everyone. And within an hour or so, all hell broke loose in Karnataka. I mean, in Bangalore, people were after my blood. There was a panelist called Ranganathan, no relation. He digitally spat at me, said, "Thu Ranganathan for." You are a blot on the name of Ranganathan. Then there came some actors who said, "We can give Tamil Nadu Kaveri, but not Mysore Park." Catch this rascal Ranganathan, will take him. So I had to apologize. I had to ask my friend Tejasvi came to my rescue. I said, "Tejasvi, please help me." And he said, "No, he's joking and all." But of course, I wasn't joking. I was very serious. Mysore Park is Tamil. The second reason so it is a pilgrimage for me to come to Coimbatore. The second reason for the pilgrimage is that, and this is a serious one, that I see a lot of devas and devis out here in the gathering. Of course, we live in a woke world, so there might be somewhat of indeterminate gender, I don't know. But there is one God that I wanted to meet, and that God is Dr. K.K. Mohammed. I say this for no other reason than for being, if I can be ruthlessly objective, that if there are people who are still unsure about how they should proceed in their life, what kind of profession they should do, the answer lies in the life of Dr. Mohammed himself. The topic I'm going to talk on is whose freedom of speech is it anyway? So I'm going to be talking about the cancel culture, the freedom of speech and expression. Decades ago, before Twitter existed, before social media existed, when Dr. Mohammed discovered that indeed there was a temple of Hindu origin under the Babri Mosque, he was authoritatively asked by a lot of his peers as well as the government to suppress this news. He actually was. And in his response, he said something that I quote. He said something in Sanskrit. I'm sorry, my Sanskrit is as good as M.R. Venkatesh's Tamil. So, my apologies there. And I promise Venkatesh I'll get back at M.R. for all the slides that he's committed against both of us. So, Dr. Mohammed said, Loka Sangramay Vapi Sampasham Kartum Hasi Sarva Dharme Nidhanam Shreya, which is, I will speak the truth. I prefer death than to lie on duty. So while there are many devis and devas that I've had the pleasure of meeting and interacting, the second part of my pilgrimage is to have the honor of meeting Dr. Mohammed. Thank you very much. The topic that I will, and I promised the organizers that I will keep at least half of the time allotted to me to have a wonderful question and answer sessions with the audience. Unlike M.R. Anna, who gobbled up all the time as he does being a panelist, I didn't leave any to you, but I promised to do that. So I'll probably speak for 15 odd minutes, and then we'll leave the rest half an hour or 20 minutes to the audience. You can ask me questions, and we'll love to have an interactive session. When we talk of the title, which is whose FOS is it anyway? It is a rhetorical question, because the answer is it should be ours. It is our freedom of speech. Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be even asking this question. And I speak as a free speech absolutist. I have been ever since I came in the public eye, or possibly even before that. I've structured my views, and I'm happy to say that unlike many politicians, I'm not a hypocrite about it. My views have not changed for the last 10-12 years. But when I say that I'm a free speech absolutist, I also have to explain, because there are 4 caveats that I carry when I call myself a free speech absolutist. It doesn't mean that I believe in absolute free speech. No, I don't. What are these 4 caveats? And let me explain those 4 caveats. The first one is that you cannot divulge state secrets, obviously. this would come as a detriment to many Indian journalists. But yeah, you cannot, for example, talk to Pakistan and say, oh, these are the military positions, Indian army positions, and you can do that. And this would also goes for M.R. Venkatesh Anna when he divulged that I don't know Tamil, and that's a state secret. You can't divulge that in the name of freedom of speech. Obviously, that goes. The second caveat is that you cannot shout in the name of freedom of speech fire in a crowded auditorium, because that will affect the physical well-being of people. That would harm people physically. You can't do that. The third is that you cannot have a hate speech in a mob, lead a mob by giving a hate speech that has immediate violent consequences. Now, I have worded what I've said very carefully. So, of course, we've had books for 1300 years that have hate speech, and nobody does anything about it. We accept it, and although people have tried to ban it, the high courts have thrown those petitions out. So you cannot ban a book that is 1300 years old, that is as hateful as it can get. Now, I cannot name what those books are, but I'm sure all of you are clever enough to understand that. We don't have rules that allow me to say that openly. So you cannot, for example, say something to a mob, and in the next instant, in the palpable, immediate instant, violence is committed. So that, of course, harms someone physically. So that is the third caveat. And the fourth is, you cannot slander someone with evidence, because then it goes into the realm of defamation laws, and there are lawsuits for that, and that person can sue you. So while you can say that broadly, you can allege, and people are alleging that all the time, because you can't have 1 billion lawsuits. I mean, as it is, our justice system is overburdened. So you can say Anand is corrupt. I'm within my rights to sue you. But that's like very abstract. I mean, then he'll say, well, what do you mean by what is corruption? Usi mein, the whole case will go in that. Then you'll say, oh, there are moral parameters to corruption, and what I meant was that Anand is morally corrupt, he's ethically corrupt, he's not actually corrupt. So, I mean, all that is very abstract. So you can say Anand is corrupt, but you cannot say that Anand took $600,000 from Ambani, because then you are alleging something, slandering me with evidence which you don't have, or if you have it, then you produce it. So these are the 4 caveats that I have. Other than that, I think everything is kosher, everything should be allowed in the domain of free speech. So when I say I'm a free speech absolutist, these are the 4 things. Other than that, it should be allowed. Now, why do I say everything should be allowed? That is the crux, the nub of the issue. I say it because who am I to judge? Who? Will I decide what you say is right or wrong? Because that is what essentially is happening. That is what is happening in each of our domains. You talk about science, you talk of philosophy, you talk of news, politics, sports. We are determining. Subjectivity is being injected into our thought process, and we are saying what you said I did not like. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to either sue you, or I'm going to commit or have a mob against you. So that is subjectivity. Now, in any given domain, the moment you bring in the word subjectivity, all hell breaks loose, because what is acceptable to one person may not or will not be acceptable to the other person. What I find not egregious, you may find terribly egregious, and you say, I find this unacceptable. And that is what is happening. And unless we have a kind of a unwritten rule, which Hindus and Hinduism, I don't know whether we are allowed to say Hindus or Hindu religion, I mean, Kamal Hassan might object to that. But incidentally, before the phrase jackass came into being, you could still call Kamal Hassan God. I mean, just because the word jackass didn't exist doesn't mean that jackasses didn't exist. But the fact of the matter is that this is all subjective. And when I say Hindus and Hinduism have been taking it on the chin very gladly, and there is a reason for that. And the reason for that is that is how societies progress, through mutations that are accumulated, through diversity that comes. That is how societies and civilizations adapt. And when a civilization cannot adapt, you can either leave the realm of societal living, which is equitable and you have well-being for everyone, or you simply die and perish. Now, Hindus haven't perished. Hinduism hasn't perished. Of course, it has a lot to do with the tremendous strength of our ancestors who fought for it and did not decide to convert. We were just talking in the morning how most of the most vociferous religious zealots of the Islamic dispensation were either first generation Kashmiri Hindus or second generation Jains. As Naipaul has said, that it is always the one who's converted who is the most vigorous in spreading the faith. But the point I'm trying to make is that Hinduism very early on realized, through its all-questioning thesis and philosophical bent of mind, that unless I start to question everything, unless I pass through this, as they say, phrase, "Aag ka darya," a river of fire, unless I swim through that, I will not be able to have faith with the kind of resolution that I must have that my idea is good. I will be mediocre. I will collect a group of mediocre people who will say, yes, this is a great idea. But the moment I come out of that ecosystem, you may call it that, or left liberal ecosystem, left liberal being an oxymoron of a kind. But each one of them is supporting each other, even though all of them are complete jackasses. They don't know, expression is rather rude, elbow from their ass, but that's the whole thing. None of them is a proper historian or a commentator or anyone. And I'll come to their hypocrisy when it comes to free speech. But the fact of the matter is, they are, as Vivek Agnihotри's film said, that government to tumhari hai, lekin system to hamara hai. System unka hai. Because the system is so huge. It can almost run the whole theme of who's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. That is the strength of the system. And believe me, my commiserations that Nobel Prize was not awarded, but in 2024, when Rahul Gandhi becomes the Prime Minister, Bharat Ratna would be awarded. So, have faith. That was a joke, by the way. Because as I said, there is a strong parallel between Kamal Haasan and Rahul Gandhi. But the fact of the matter is that in Hinduism, religion is an offshoot of a way of life. While in Islam or Abrahamic religions that haven't had reforms, way of life is an offshoot of religion. And that is why in Hinduism, you can mutate, you can, things change over a long period of time when you have a way of life rather than when you have a very strictly, prescribed way, the way you're going to deal with set of rules. So Hinduism has always accepted that yes, we need criticism. We can mock every ism except criticism. We accept it because that is how we are going to change. We are going to say that yes, this idea has stood the test of time. These phrases, every word has a density. And when you say this is an idea that stood the test of time, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Rather than you come up with an idea and you have 200,000 people saying, oh, what a brilliant idea. This is amazing. This is what the left does. And after 10 or 15 years, that idea is no one even talking about it because that's just complete crap. But there are some ideas, a lot of ideas in Hinduism that have stood for not just 10 years, 20 years, but for thousands of years, millennia. Why is that? That is because it was left open for anyone to come and criticize it. And from Natya Shastra itself, I'm not a Vedic scholar of any dispensation. I know as much as I said, about Hinduism and Vedas as possibly Kamal Hassan or M.R. Venkatesh knows about it. But my criticism of MR ends there. he's there at the back. He's saying, "I'll come outside. I'll see." So it is our FOS. I was going to say our SOS, but it's our FOS. We have to reclaim it because we have to show to the world that this idea will stand the test of time. Criticize it. I throw it to the public. Beat it. Do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you accept that this idea is good, this idea is bad. Let us carry forward this idea. Now, I'll tell you what the left liberal, all this cabal does. These so-called, they call themselves liberal, but they're anything but liberal. And you've seen it with a very recent thing of Miss Monica. She wrote a book on the 2020 Delhi riots. That book was accepted by the publisher, very reputed publisher, Bloomsbury. And that book, the manuscript went through the editorial stage, it was reviewed, it went through 3 editorial reviews, and after that the book was ready. And then all hell broke loose. You had complete idiots from the leftists and those things. They said that no, this book should not be published. They completely browbeat and blackmailed Bloomsbury. Starting from their historians onward, they ran a campaign, and as a result, Bloomsbury had to backtrack. They didn't publish that book. And when you ask these people, are you the editor? Are you the publisher of Bloomsbury? What gives you the right to say that Bloomsbury should not publish this? Their response was very interesting. They said, the book is a bunch of lies, and that is why it should not be published. So by that logic, any book that says that the earth was created in 7 days, and the earth is flat, and the moon is split into 2, and people are going on flying horses, science has proven that to be a lie. So by their own logic, those holy books should not be published. What kind of crowd is that? But that is what their ecosystem has perfected. We decide. And if we cannot decide, we still have our system which is intact. We will tell those publishers that we will not allow those books to be published. And what happened was they actually won. And I'll tell you how they won, because there are many from the, or you can say the other side, the sensible, logical side, that said if Bloomsbury takes back that book, then I'm not going to publish Bloomsbury. Mr. Sanjay Dixit, I really respect him for that. His book was almost going to come out. It's going to be almost published. And he said, I'm withdrawing my book. Sanjeev Sanyal said that I'm not going to publish from Bloomsbury. I was also one of the ones who said, I'm taking my book back. I returned with interest the advance that I had got for my book. But the fact of the matter is that Bloomsbury is still prospering. There are many people from all sides. They have their reasons, and I would say they're justifiable. They have the rationalization. But the fact is, nothing happened. Bloomsbury did not publish Miss Monica's book. Who won at the end? They won. So all these champions of FOS who say that we stand for free speech, they did not stand for free speech. They browbeat a publisher into rejecting a book that was almost going to be published within a week's time. It was that late that they moved in. And they've done it time and again. Nupur Sharma is another example. Now, that's a very interesting example, because when you hear the rationalization of the people who again who support Salman Rushdie, but they object to Nupur Sharma. Now, Salman Rushdie, I don't believe in this concept of blasphemy, by the way. But if at all somebody were to draw out what blasphemy is, I think it's terrible, but if somebody were to do it, certainly Salman Rushdie blasphemed. Because, the kind of things that he said about the Prophet Muhammad, about his wives, about his followers, about Mecca. You can say, as I said, if somebody were to draw out what blasphemy is, no one should. But if somebody should, then yes. Compare that to Nupur. She quoted the hadiths. Now, are you telling me that kafirs or non-believers cannot quote Islamic scriptures? Because that is what the reality is. But the fact of the matter is, on the very day when all this broke loose, I tweeted those two verses. Now, my son is still satisfactorily attached to my tongue. Till now, I'm speaking. I'm not a hologram. But now there is a genuine danger. For how long? Because at least 7 people have been grievously injured, 2 of them killed, for simply saying that I support Nupur Shah. And it is not that some of them do not have any powerful parties backing them, that they are, commoners. You have a Shiv Sena member, very prominent member, Lawrence. He's a Christian, by the way. He is living in fear. He contacted me from nowhere and he said, look, I'm living in a locality which is a Muslim locality, and they're saying, we know your address, we know your grandmother's address, we know where you live, we know where your relatives live. Take back the fact that you said that you support Nupur Sharma. That's it. He's not committed any blasphemy. But he knows his future. I hope it is not the same that what held for Kamlesh Tiwari or Kanhaiya Lal ji. But in the name of free speech, when you ask these people who supported Rushdie, you know what they said? They said Nupur, being a non-Muslim, had no right to comment upon things that concern Muslims. These are the same people who were supporting the Charlie Hebdo journalists, who were commenting, who were Christian, but were commenting on Islam. So you see the hypocrisy, and they have rationalized it to such extent, this cabal, that each one of them is supporting the other. They are writing op-eds. In fact, one celebrated. He's not a leftist. He's not even a Darbari. I don't know how to slot that guy. But he's just a jackass, maybe. A copper-plated jackass. Because those are the ones very Teflon coated. They can sit on hot fire and still they can sit for prolonged periods. Copper-plated jackasses. He withdrew his support that he had for decades for Salman Rushdie, so that he could criticize Nupur. This is the kind of moral vacuity that exists on the other side. Okay, for 3 decades he was supporting Salman Rushdie. He wrote so many articles supporting him, but then he must have thought, how can I support Salman Rushdie and oppose Nupur? So what do? I cannot support Nupur. So let me oppose Salman Rushdie. These are the people, they are vice chancellors, they are people at high position. You have the other side vying for their attention, craving for, their validity. Why? This is why I say that if you really need to go for asking this question, whose FOS is it anyway? You have to realize that each one of us is an ecosystem of our own. Let us not vie for an ecosystem, because we would unnecessarily be replicating mediocrity. It would be a landfill of lies and untruths, and it would spew methane like the leftist ecosystem does. Each one of us should lend our ideas that we generate or support open to criticism. And that is what the right wing does. And many people criticize it on the face of it, ki hamesha ladte, they're always fighting, and there are memes that says, खूब लड़ो, समाप्त कर दो एक दूसरे को. Lovely memes that right wingers are always fighting. I think it's a great thing. I think it's fantastic, because you are lending your ideas to scrutiny, which is what happens in science all the time. I mean, can you imagine a scenario if I were to say that cold fusion is a fact? It is also a fact that man and woman were created by God, and I have proven it scientifically. And as a scientist, I will not allow you to criticize this fact that cold fusion, I say, exists. I will not allow. It is blasphemy. Can you imagine a scientist ever doing that? Think about it. Scientists don't do that. Why? Because they want their ideas to stand the test of time. What is the point if I tell you that you're not supposed to criticize this? That is what happened with Galileo. He was forced to apologize. He was killed for saying what was right. Are we going into the territory where people cannot even say what they feel resolutely about their ideas? So that is the tragedy. The third thing that I want to say out here is again an argument which is a very rational and intelligent argument. That is, because you say that let anybody say anything. The Muslims will then say things about Hinduism, which they are, by the way, and by Muslims I mean, you can say non-Hindus or the establishment that is happening in the film domain or in arts, in others. They are criticizing Hinduism vapidly and rapidly. When Hindus criticize, it leaves the realm of the court system and it goes extrajudicial. So it doesn't matter if the court will allow you or not, you will have those Sar Tan Se Juda people and they have already decided that you will die. So this argument is that you need a system whereby you can hold the non-Hindus also to be prosecuted for what they say. Because Hindus are being prosecuted extrajudicially for what they say. So it's a rational point. To that I say, are you not taking Hindus, thousands upon thousands of Hindus as collateral? Because I'll give you an example. In, let us say, 100 cases of Hindus saying things that Muslims take objection to, only a handful, maybe 2 or 3 are the ones that Muslims object as true blasphemy, that they've said something against Prophet Muhammad or something like that. Overwhelming majority of them are just passing a photoshopped something or something that is that the words offend. It's not blasphemous. Now, in this whole system where you want to put this section 295A and prosecute those Hindus, the lives of those 98 people who did not commit blasphemy are also destroyed. Just one example would suffice. There's a guy called Sunny Gupta. He is a 20-year-old engineer in Maharashtra. He was thrown in jail for 45 days. The news that he has been jailed for 45 days came out after he came out of jail. So nobody could protest. Nobody knew the news. That is the other thing. The propaganda is run 2 ways. One is you run a propaganda of fake news. The other, you run a propaganda where you don't publish the news at all, so that there is no outrage on it. So nobody knew that Sunny Gupta has already spent 45 days in jail. You know what his crime was? He just requested Hindus to not go to Ajmer Sharif. That is all he did. Muslims objected and he was thrown in jail for 45 days under section 295A. Now, did he commit blasphemy? Even Muslims accept that he did not commit blasphemy. But what he said, we object to because he offended our religious sensibilities. It is the same Ajmer Dargah that stood up for the killers of Kanhaiya Lalji, who supported Nupur Sharma, where those 3 Chishtis, one of them aided and abetted the killers of Kanhaiya Lal, the fellow, I don't know whether he's been arrested, he was on the run. The second one said that if you touch or say anything like what Nupur did, earthquake will come in India. We will start such a revolution. And the third one, I don't know what he did, he's still on the run. So this is the same Ajmer Dargah where Hindus essentially are running it, making it profitable. And all Sunny did was, he asked the Hindus not to go there. He was thrown in jail. His life is destroyed now. For what reason? Does anyone in this audience support that yes, because we want a law that free speech is not absolute and anyone who offends religious sensibilities, be it Hindu religious sensibilities or Muslim religious sensibilities, should be prosecuted. Therefore, anybody who said that what Sunny Gupta said is offensive was within his rights, and the court and our systems are within their right to deem it offensive, and therefore Sunny Gupta should be put in jail. Does it make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. I'll give you another example of Aman. He's an anchor. You know, he's an anchor who's who says self-confessed right-winger, and he said something when a temple was bulldozed in Rajasthan. That was considered egregious to the Muslim community, and because Rajasthan is ruled by the Congress, they sent the police to arrest him. They sent the police all the way to where he stays in Delhi or someplace to arrest him. Now, what he said was actually factual, that indeed that temple was raised by the authorities in Rajasthan. But that seemed to have offended some people. So it is an absolute free-for-all. What I say is that you should not have any rule whatsoever, because no rule is better than some rule which has to be decided on the basis of subjectivity. Hindus have to reclaim this. The third and final point before I throw it open to questions is that why do I say this? Why is Hinduism better? Why has it evolved compared to other thought processes or ideologies? It is because if we did not have free speech, if Hindus were not free to criticize each other and their ideas, we would not have had Anand Saraswati. We would not have had this amazing document called Satyarth Prakash. Okay, we would not have had Arya Samaj. And right now, believe it or not, there would be many Hindus who would have wanted to put Anand Saraswati in jail, who would have asked for the ban of Satyarth Prakash. And if you were to read, I urge you to read Satyarth Prakash. It's not enough. Now we have to go back to what the teachings of our heroes were. Rather than eulogize and worship the heroes, let us look at their teaching objectively. Read Satyarth Prakash and trust you me, there are about 12 or 13 chapters. Every chapter you would be sucking in a breath saying, oh my God, he actually said this. Oh my God, he actually wrote this. This is what he's written. But for 100 years, Hindus accepted it. There are millions of Arya Samajis. They adapted. They said, no, what he said is right. Let us put it to test. And if the pass the test, people turned into Arya Samajis. They were welcome. And when somebody were criticizing Hindus, I said, you know what is the punishment for apostasy in Hinduism? It is Bharat Ratna. Ambedkar said, I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu. He converted. He became an apostate. You know, every day at least 15 to 20,000 people go to the place where he turned into a Buddhist in Nagpur. I've been to that place. Hindus worship him. He was given Bharat Ratna. This is the punishment of apostasy in Hinduism. You know what is the punishment for apostasy in Islam? It's death. You cannot become an apostate in Islam. I mean, you can, but then you will be living in fear because anyone you are, by law, it is commanded that anyone who has left the fold of Islam has to be killed. In Hinduism, it is the other way. So, we have to go back and remember the glory of what it means to have freedom of speech. Let us cherish it. And lastly, 30 seconds. When I gave the example of Satyarth Prakash, for a century it has stood the test of time. People venerate Swami Dayananda. People read that book. Many might find, as I say, the current crop might find it blasphemous. But for 100 years, the book was not banned. No Hindu asked for a ban. Until 2008, two people asked for the ban. It went to the High Court. They were protests. Do you know who those two people were? Who asked Satyarth Prakash to be banned? No idea. They were Muslims. Muslims asked for Satyarth Prakash to be banned. Hindus did not. Why? Because the Muslims said there was a fatwa on Satyarth Prakash. See this news. There was a fatwa on Satyarth Prakash written a century or more ago. Why? Because it said it is opening the eyes of Hindus. If it is opening the eyes of believers, those believers could also be Muslims. And those Muslims could then do ghar wapsi. I am not kidding you. This was the reason why fatwa was given. This is the power of thinking, of ideas. And if we start banning those ideas, then we ourselves will not develop. I'll end there. Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. I think.
Extremely lucid and beautiful session, sir. The flow was wonderful. Probably thanks to the Mysore Pa or Mysore Pa water. Few questions, audience.
Sure. Please.
You made a reference to this cancel culture that we keep hearing about. Would you like to quickly touch upon it, please?
Well, everyone, I mean, we have the example of Dr. Mohammed sitting here. If people are cancelled on Twitter, I know there is an outrage, but it doesn't affect them to the extent if academics are cancelled. Because if someone on Twitter is cancelled or banned, the life is not destroyed in one sense. Of course, you can say it's a mental torture. Anything is a mental torture. But just imagine, and Dr. Mohammed will say, of course, as a first-person account of what happened when he was cancelled. But as an academic, I can see what would happen. Your papers, your authoritative work will be rejected. Your peers themselves will stop inviting you to conferences. They will not accept your work. Not only will they reject your work, they will ask others to ridicule your work. You will not be able to publish your work even as a book form. Your life as an academic, as a scholar would end. And this would happen half of the time you won't even realize it is happening. Maybe in the arts, yes, the effect would be catastrophic. But it is a few degrees more of catastrophe in science. Because in science, especially in wet science where you need money to do your experimental research, you would suddenly see that grants have dried up. Because ultimately the grant process is you write a proposal, you give it to a grant agency. The grant agency comes under the domain of the government. The grant agency has reviewers. Everything is kind of opaque. Even now, even today it is opaque. So you wouldn't even know why your grant has been rejected, but there would be. You would run out of money, and if you run out of money, you cannot run your lab. If you can't run your lab, you won't have PhD students, so your life ends. It's not like you've been blocked on Twitter or Twitter has suspended you. Here, people have suspended you from your way of life. That is what has happened to tens of thousands of people in all domains. Dr. Mohammed is one, Dr. Meenakshi Jain is another. I mean, even right-wing publication houses were told not to publish a book, and they succumbed. This is the situation. You had lawyers, you had judges, you had the whole setup when it goes against you. When an institution goes against you, you cannot do anything. I'll give you an example. A Mumbai High Court judge was slated to become a Supreme Court judge. In a week's time, in 6 days' time, his name was removed. Indira Gandhi removed it. And I am taking this is authoritatively said by the Supreme Court judge himself through a book that was published by the son of a current Supreme Court judge, Chandrachud. It's called Supreme Whispers. Please read that book if you can. It is alarming. It is shocking. Why was his name removed? Because he attended. He was not an RSS guy. He was not a BJP guy. That judge attended the funeral of Mr. Gowal. That was his crime. His life changed. So you won't even know. That judge didn't even know. This came out 30 years after. He must be thinking, what happened? Tomorrow I was to be, nominated as a Supreme Court judge, and now where is the letter? 30 years later, the truth has come out. So most of these things happen, by sleight of hand. You have no idea this is happening. But if the institution decides it's working against you, you really can't do it.
Yeah, many of the free speeches by particularly Hindus is halted and haunted by sheer fear.
Yes.
And to set in the fear, like example of Kanayalalan has been committed, so that there is fear among this community. How do we tackle that, and what could be the remedies for in future?
That's a great question. It can be tackled by two ways. I prefer the first way, which is the state, which is our government, has to tackle it. It has to be tackled from top down. Because when it is tackled from top down, you are sending a message. When it comes from bottom up, that message can be painful, slow, and violent, which we don't want. We don't want a billion Hindus to come onto the streets, leave all what they are doing, important things, businesses, lawyers, scientists, academics, in all streams, to come onto the streets and protest and say, look, we will not accept this. Other than that, the alternative is that the government comes and says, what the hell is happening? We have to wrench control back. But the government is weak. You know what happened in the Nupur Sharma case? The government actually was one of the three perpetrators that threw Nupur under the bus. They were the ones. I hold them responsible. A third responsible. Supreme Court is of course another. The establishment is another. And the government is another. You see, your bravery very quickly turns to bravado if the state doesn't back you. I am a coward. I accept it. I am a coward. I am not as brave as how Kamlesh Tiwari was. I may not accept what he said was right or wrong, but he said it. I can't say those things because I know the state will not back me. So I may think that I am very brave in saying it, but 12 hours later, that bravery is turning into bravado. And there is only one consequence of bravado, which is self-censorship. There is no other.
So what is the solution, sir?
Solution is the state has to come. The state has to say this is unacceptable. The state has to back those who are criticizing religion. Here it wasn't even criticism. I don't understand why the state didn't back Nupur. She quoted. I quote the verses all the time. Thank Zakir Naik. But I mean, he is my guru. My guru Dakshina is to Zakir. He opened my eyes. The other day, people were criticizing that the BJP government in Gujarat is sanctioning Bhagavad Gita to be read in school. I said, this is wrong. Don't teach Bhagavad Gita. Teach Quran. So many people, right wingers, got it wrong. They started abusing. They didn't understand. Everyone, every Indian needs to read the Quran. That is what has been hidden. You don't read what is open. Of course you read it, but it's been told to you. Your grandmother has told you what Gita means. Gita ka saar kya hai? Everyone told. You don't. Did you know all those verses that are for you? You didn't. You read those. But here, Nupur quoted those verses. She didn't say anything egregious. It was not blasphemous. Still, the state did not back. So, you have to go from top down.
So, how do we compel the government to do that? How we as a citizen can do that?
Yeah, by voting a government that would, but have faith. I think the moment BJP gets a majority, it will start doing all this. Is there a possibility, sorry sir? Change you to
Maximum anti-national,
if the if the sun were to start rising from the west, then possibly but again, I ask you the reason for that. Think about the reason. Why are these nubs? And it's not about being anti-national, and I don't care for that phrase. It is about being irrational. That worries me more than being anti-national. If someone is anti-national, he can be identified. You can be corrected. But if someone is illogically irrational, you have to find out the reason for that illogic and irrationality. And sir, what is the reason? That we have ministers in this government who say we are proud to not even have changed one comma in the text. If you keep on teaching that Aurangzeb was great, if you keep on celebrating Tipu Jayanti, if you keep on saying Che Guevara was fantastic, Castro was great, nothing wrong in Stalin, Mao was a hero, what do you think would the people who read all that would turn out to be? They would turn out to be in JNU, wouldn't they? So that, look at I don't blame them. I apply the Anderson razor, which is, you had Warren Anderson, he escaped. I don't blame him for escaping, that's what thieves do. I blame Rajiv Gandhi for letting him go, for sending an ambassador to the tarmac so that, Warren Anderson could escape. So I don't blame those people who think Aurangzeb was great or Tipu was great. I blame, it is your responsibility. It's been 8 years. What have you done to the education system? You brought out the new education policy. But sometimes, more important than how you teach is what you teach. You have to think of what you are teaching rather than how you are teaching. You can have a brilliant classroom with all those projection and everything, but if that classroom is saying that Aurangzeb was fantastic, would you like that? So, that's the answer to that.
It has to change.
It must change. It must change. But slowly the change is coming through a lot of people who are working independently, who are bringing that change as MR said, the change has to come from within, because that is the biggest change. I have to realize, rather than this my bap thing making me realize. Of course, the books have to be done, but for example, all my life, waking life, I was given this pill that Emperor Ashoka realized what a catastrophe he had wreaked, killing 1 million people. He saw all that devastation he had committed in front of him after the Kalinga War, and then he turned Buddhist. This was taught to all of us, to me. And the picture I drew was, oh my God, look at this Hindu king. He's killed millions, and then he's realized, then he's converted. So Buddhism, he's converted to something as salvation. Something is better than what he was before that made him kill all that. It was only after I read Sanjeev Sanyal's book, The Churn, where he authoritatively shows that Ashoka was for 8 years already a Buddhist when he went to the Kalinga War. Now, just imagine what would happen, and I am not even in the field of the arts. As a scientist, you're forgiven to think of being ignorant about all these things. But the fact of the matter is, personally left, I would like to hunt for that jackass who wrote that, no other word to describe that, quote unquote, writer who said he converted to Buddhism after Kalinga War. I'd like to speak to him, catch hold of him. I hope he's not in the BJP government right now, but you never know. He might be our education minister.
The books.
I have an opinion that we must wear our religion first.
Okay.
Be open, advertise our religion. Why are we hiding it? That could show the numbers.
Who's hiding it? So I mean, when you say religion, I see it as a way of life. So I am a Darwinian atheist, being a culturally aware Hindu. I say it openly. I mean, I am an atheist.
Yeah, we are talking about Hinduism.
Yes.
So, like Mr. Ramesh, T.R. Ramesh is doing, be proud about our legacy, wear it,
Absolutely.
As he says, don't go individually to the temple, go as a group.
Right.
That's where probably, the strength would be seen as well. We don't even have to talk.
Yes, and what TR is doing is just phenomenal. And the other day I quoted, somebody had said 2 months ago that we are second-class citizens. Hindus are second-class citizens. So in that 2-minute clip, I said, no, I showed why we are third-class citizens. Then after a week, it came to be fourth-class citizens, because things just keep adding up. And 2 weeks ago, I gave authoritatively proof that we are 8th class citizens. Now it could be 10th class, I don't know how. I hope we remain citizens. But the fact of the matter is, you have a government which is exactly the same as the previous governments when it comes to treating Hindus. I mean, you have to accept it. You really have to accept it. So,
What is the reason for BJP to be so backfooted on this thing? What is it? They have a majority.
yes. I think it's, again, that's a political question. Many people would say it's a master stroke or a long strategy, 4D chess, 5D chess, ek haath mein computer, ek mein Quran. You can't. I think it is being squeamish. I personally feel it is squeamish because I think it gives such a wrong message. To give just one example, 2 years ago, we had almost a war with China. I mean, if it wasn't a real war, it was definitely a metaphorical war. It was, on a citizen level, we were hating the Chinese, we were hating everything. But in the last 2 years, you know what has happened? Our imports from China have been the highest ever. The trade deficit is almost $100 billion. Now, is that a sign of a government or a country that hates or calls the other country an enemy nation? And just to put the cherry on top, China has interned 1 million Muslims in concentration camps, is feeding them pork, is feeding them alcohol, forcibly sterilizing them, removing Islam from them, all assemblages. And India abstained from even discussing that.
It's good, no, because the world is saved from so-called peace people. The world is saved from so-called peace people.
No, what I'm saying is that we are scared. We are not able to show. We take pride in being friendly with Israel. We talk with Tom Israel. Do you think Israel could allow this? Which other large economy has 7 lakh Hindus, refugees in their own land? I mean, Kashmiri Hindus can't go back, and we seem to be all right with it. Places of worship act. TR is discussing. Lakhs of crores is being lost by Hindus because the government is deciding what is the price of the rent that you will pay for the land that is controlled by the temple. Government is deciding. You talk to TR. Lakhs, maybe 3 lakh, 4 lakh crores. All that money could have been controlled by the temple, who could set up institutions for educating Hindus, like Muslim institutions can do, churches can do. But what do we hear? Whenever it comes to largesse or charity, always langar. Always the Sikhs are the first to do it. Always the churches are making all the hospitals. Always the churches are making all the education. And Hindus are not being allowed to make. What are you talking about? When you're tom-tomming church made hospital and church made schools, Hindu temples can make 10,000 times more. But they're not being allowed to because the government is doing it. But what happens? The gullibility. Hindus feel great when the government spends 300 crores of, says, its money in that Kashi Vishwanath corridor. You know what the hundi collections of a month of Tirupati is? 700 crores. You can make 2 such corridors in a month. But we feel great that look, Hindu Renaissance is coming, Hindu Renaissance is coming. So, these are sensible things that anybody should do. Please tell me when the time is up.
Sir, should we actually raise so much? My question is on this freedom of expression.
Yes.
Particularly in southern part of India, Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
This freedom of expression has been it's taken for granted, right? Now when I was coming, I saw on both sides of the Gundipuru Bridge, there is going to be a protest on, and they have openly painted it's against Brahmins and North Indians getting got positions.
Yes.
Now they use this atheist Magna. Your friend Kamal Hassan also keeps messing up.
My friend.
So basically,
see how subtly he uses his freedom of expression. I can't even sue him.
So basically, people like us, we all jumped into social media, seeing that there is a sort of extremism seeping into the Hindu civilization, which has been so tolerant, and just because to oppose somebody who is trying to tamper our civilization. Now, a lot of youngsters are getting into that, and things like it turns out to be blasphemous in the social media. People like us, we keep telling, if you want to oppose something, don't get into trouble by trying to attack other religions. So it's all under this umbrella of freedom of expression. People don't know how to use it as a thing. So my question is, where do you draw the lines exactly, so that we can guide, say that in order to preserve our civilization, what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do. If that is very clear, then probably it can save life of many Hindu Purshamas.
Yeah, no, it's a very very deep question, and let me answer it in 2 parts. First of all, about Tamil Nadu, what you said. Now, it's a very strange occurrence that we see in Tamil Nadu, where you have millions of people who eulogize and worship Periyar, who used his Brahmastra of freedom of expression with such gay abandon that it is scary, the kind of level to which he took his freedom of expression. But the moment you say anything against Periyar, then they come after you. They nearly arrested our Professor Vaidyanathan, and they have arrested so many people just for saying things against Periyar. So I have been very careful, I have to say this, admit, being a coward, that whenever I want to expose Periyar, I use others. I use the sword of Jawaharlal Nehru to expose Periyar rather than, because I know they will come after me if I say something. So while Periyar is on record saying that if you see a Brahmin and a snake, kill the Brahmin first. He said all sorts of things. We'll we'll burn the constitution, hit Rama with slippers in one of which Rajnikant got into trouble with. But you know what? This is the quote of Jawaharlal Nehru, he said to Kamraj. And I'm quoting him. This anti-Brahmin campaign of Periyar is distressing. Whatever he says can only be said by a criminal or a lunatic. Put him in a lunatic asylum and let this perverted mind be treated there. Now this is Jawaharlal Nehru. Now Congresses are in a bind. What do we do? We want to get after this Ranganathan fellow, but he is quoting Jawaharlal Nehru. That's the thing. But as to the second point, line should not be drawn. Because who is to draw the line? That itself is subjective. If I am deciding, I draw this line, you do not criticize this, you criticize this, then that is wrong. That is up to my subjectivity. And another thing, when I talked about that, when we do not have, freedom of speech to write things that will reform Hinduism, like Satyarth Prakash, quote unquote reform again, it's all relative. You are also taking the right away from people who want to criticize Islam and Christianity, justifiably, academically, scholarly. It's not just Salman Rushdie who's criticized Islam. There are many scholars who criticize. Now, when you say this, when you take offense to that, when you started taking offense to even quoting Islamic scriptures as being blasphemous, how on earth can you criticize? So, where does all that scholarship go of criticizing? Ultimately, what is religion? Religion is an idea. It is a thought. Yes, all right, that 2 billion, 3 billion people are following that thought. But is it always that the size matters? Did Islam not start with 10 people or 5 people? Were they not Muslims? So the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how many people are following that idea. You should be free to criticize that idea and to tell those people that I don't think they would change. I mean, none of my utterances would make a Muslim do a ghar wapsi or make him embarrassed enough or whatever the case may be that, leave the fold of Islam. Obviously, none. It's the other, they want to convert me. They is half Muslim anyway because he quotes them the verses. But the point of the matter is not for that, it is for my own philosophical, whatever you may call it, journey. And I want to learn more, and how do you learn more? You need to criticize what you're reading. So there should be no line drawn.
Sir, one request. Your Arnab Goswami's friend. We are listening to him many times. But sometimes it's so irritating that everybody is so one man speaks and we are.
My wife says the same about me, so I don't know.
But please tell him that there are-
I will tell Arnab's wife.
Sir, do we really have to pay so much of attention to what Mr. Raman has said?
So the question is interesting because he's the fourth person who's told me this. The question is, do we really need to pay attention to people like Kamal Hassan, what he said?
You're playing into his hands.
Right. Now, it's a very interesting question because rebuttal can also make you learn a lot of things. Rebuttals are important. If you were to ignore all illogical irrationality, what will happen is that illogical irrationality is not going to go away. That stays. And that then brainwashes tens of millions of people. So if people like Kamal Hassan or leftists are not rebutted, if you do not rebut the facts that Ashoka was already, a Buddhist, if you don't rebut the fact that Aurangzeb killed 4.6 million people, if you don't rebut so many other facts, what Tipu did and others did, you are at liberty to not do it and ignore because they're wrong. But if you do it, you open the eyes of a lot of other people who otherwise would not be brainwashed. But as I say, the chances of the leftists being brainwashed is very less because for being brainwashed, you have to have a brain first. I think I've taken
One question.
Sure.
Now, we have been hearing so many things about harming Hinduism, killing Hinduism, and the government is not doing anything according to it. But all Hindus are going through these workshops and media, and all Hindus are from inside, they are ready to do something for the nation, and they want to do something. So, there is no guidance to the Hindu society what to do. See, we have crores of rupees with Hindus, they are prepared to give. There is so many things which we can do it. So, I request people like you in the panel and other few also there. So, you all should sit together you are talking good, we are inspired by what to do. So, I request all of you, panel people, sit together and think something and guide society what to do. See, our society is confused. They have money, they are prepared to give time, they are prepared to sacrifice, but there is no guidance from any Hindu organization.
No leader, no leader to
No direction.
That's a big problem.
See, there is no direction from RSS, no direction from Vishnu to Parisham. And many Congress people are Hindu, but they don't want to listen to them. So why can't we have a common platform, all of us, and sit together and think of guiding society? We can win many things without political involvement.
That's
So I request all of you to listen.
If I can comment on that very briefly, sir, I think that's something what you said is in the minds of everyone. And it's not that all of us haven't thought about it. But there are two things I would like to say. I think 70 to 80% of the anger that is there in an average Hindu's mind at seeing the injustice. Places of Worship Act is just another aspect of it. Not allowing to legitimately even fight for what is legally yours. I mean, in which democracy can that be allowed? But it's being allowed, But people like T.R. Ramesh, they are the real warriors because 80% of the anger will go away if the money that comes to the temples, that is channeled by 1 billion Hindus to temples, and that money is back to the domain of the temples. The temples can decide, we give it to this school, this college, this institution. That anger would then slowly dissipate because then the problem becomes yours. Then you don't know who to blame, and that is also very important. Right now it is very easy to blame. You see, when you're fighting the British, it was very easy, you had the enemy. Here you don't know what you have to do. And the second thing is also, I'd like to say this, and this merits some thinking. You see, you have to wonder, why is it that an Indian Muslim feels so much for a Palestinian Muslim? Why is it that you had millions pouring onto the streets for the plight of the Rohingyas? They're almost rioted in India. Half of them won't even know where Burma is or who Rohingyas are. Half of them won't even know what Gaza is or who the Palestinians are. Hindus never do that. So when you are jealous of someone's unity, that means you're divided. How many Hindus, leave alone millions, how many dozens have come onto the streets demanding that 7 lakh Kashmiri Hindus be taken back to Kashmir? How many? I myself have been to Jantar Mantar once. That too, I confess, it was a challenge somebody threw and I accepted it and I went there. There were about 14 people in Jantar Mantar asking for the government to take back. In 8 years, the government has taken back 1,500. Now, but every time the Muslims come onto the streets demanding rights for Rohingyas, Hindus feel aggrieved. Why? Should it not be a lesson? Should it not be a lesson that the government has settled 40,000 Rohingyas in Kashmir, but is not settling 7 lakh Hindus in their own land? This is the question that one needs to think about. That why is it that the government is still not notified CAA 3 years after there was so much hullabaloo? Why? I don't understand. It is one of the most legitimately, morally and ethically sound laws. Why has it not done it? Initially, for 1 year the excuse was, "Pehle COVID khatam ho jane do." Arey bhai, COVID. Is there anyone wearing a mask here? But the CA is not yet notified. So I don't know where to end. I'll just end there. But I want to thank you, all of you.
One thing, the Hindus are cowards. Nobody wants to come on the street. Unless we come on the street, we will not be able to achieve anything and we will suffer. I'm telling you all, Hindus should come on the floor and then only will be achieved.
Sir, to that, if I can reply you, it's a rhetorical rising up, which is all great. But if all Hindus were to come to the streets, then this country will collapse because Hindus are making money, they're running this country. This is the same argument that the Supreme Court made when it said, I see all the people who are protesting the farm laws. Where are the people who are supporting the farm laws? And it turned out that out of 250 million farmers, 83% of those were in support of the farm laws. Did the Supreme Court want them to come to the Supreme Court to say that we support the farm laws, leave their farms, leave growing the crops in far off Andhra Pradesh or Kerala, come all the way to Delhi and tell the Supreme Court? Was it not intelligent enough to understand? So if Hindus start coming onto the streets, who will be in the schools, in the colleges, who will be a lawyer, who will be in, in the politics and foreign policy domains? You want the nation to be emptied just because the government is blind and unintelligent to listen to what is logical and rational?